I just wanted to welcome you to a interview with our future teachers that are teaching at Flowering Lotus Meditation not this weekend, but next. So they're going to be teaching on June 12th through the 14th. And it's going to be an online retreat. It's our second online retreat. Our last one went really great. And so we're very excited to have Devon and Craig. They're new authors of a new book called How to Not Be a Hot Mess. So, Devon and Craig, I'd like to ask you, if you don't mind, to introduce each other to our Sangha and to our Facebook page.
Sure. All right, I'll go first. So I'm introducing Devon.
Right.
This is Devon. Let's see, about Devon. I think the first thing that you should know about Devon is she is a very kind person. She has many, many deep, long friendships. And she's somebody that's very easy to get to know, but also very committed to the people in her life. She is an incredibly committed Dharma practitioner and meditation practitioner, and now Dharma teacher and meditation teacher. Has been practicing for more than 20 years. Man, very passionate about these things. She's also really focused on social justice and issues of race and equity and many other things, and how the Dharma and the social justice issues can work together in the world. And she has spent the last week and a half talking to white people about race. And that's why she looks so tired.
It's true. My eyes are a little hazy right now. The Zoom got the Zoom eyes going.
Right, the Zoom fatigue. Wow, great introduction. Thank you so much. So guess whose turn it is?
That's so funny. I was just going to say, this is my husband, Craig. He cooks all the meals. He does. And this week, he was amazing. He even brought me a latte, which is a huge treat in the middle of my marathon Zoom sessions. Yeah, so in a lot of ways, Craig is my inspiration. Also very committed to the Dharma and looking at how the Dharma can come to play in all of these areas of our engaged world. So he's a trained therapist, spent about 10 years training to be a psychologist, and has worked in many different populations all around the country. So most recently was a therapist in a rural behavioral health center on Molokai in Hawaii, and worked with predominantly Hawaiian population there, which was, I think kind of a messy experience, but I really certainly learned quite a lot from his work and his dedication to just making really genuine connections with people who are quite different. And, it's always humbling. I feel like our relationship is this constant growth process of like, how do we use our practice to support each other and then take that right out into the world that needs so much work in terms of dismantling these systems of oppression. So that's what we're both really committed to. And, before we started recording, Beth, we were all saying together, like, this is kind of a funny time to be saying, let's all go on retreat together, given the climate of the world, what's happening now. And I think both of us feel really strongly that now more than ever is the time to put our practice to use, to stay clear. We talk about that in the book. How do we stay clear? It's by really knowing what's going on and by waking up, committing to waking up to these systems of unconscious bias, to these systems of systemic oppression that we're all swimming in right now. So yeah, we are doing that together.
So I'm muting in between the questions because there's a thunderstorm going on around. So if anybody hears anything, that's what's going on my side. But thank you so much for sharing just your inspiration of each other. And I just finished listening to the audiobook, and I would highly recommend that kind of way of taking in the book. I'm saying that because I didn't have a physical copy of it, but also I loved the way that on the points of each, point that you guys are making, you're taking turns reading each chapter. And I really loved that. And for those of you guys that don't know, it is based on the Buddhist precepts. Is this correct?
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I feel like I've been to retreats before and I have taken the Buddhist precepts, I've read them, and I understood what I was committing to. But after listening to your book and you guys hanging out with me all day today, listening to it, I feel like I never really put it all together as it being a guide for life.
Mm-hmm.
So I was super surprised, that I don't know. I feel like I have always compartmentalized it as being like something I do at a retreat. And so I never thought about it being this deeper practice. I am a very like beginner. I haven't been in the Dharma community a long time, but so maybe other people already realize that. So I do feel a little bit novice in that way, but I feel like you guys really explain it so well as far as making it relatable to this current time. So just the modern world, right? All of the things that are happening today in every way, technology, systems, all of the things that to me people are struggling with daily that they may not even realize. So I'm not going to try to read the whole book to you guys, but I just felt like I wanted to tell you it was so good the way you tied it all together, and I was surprised at all the modern scientific backing up that you did as far as all the research that you referenced, and then including meditations all throughout. It was just really a great way to disseminate that information, I guess. So thank you so much. Wanted to ask you, is there something that you left out of the book? So like a story or something that maybe you guys were talking about that you thought we should do it, we don't know, like I don't know. I can't even imagine trying to write a book with my partner. Like that seems like pretty challenging.
Well, I could start just by saying that writing the book was surprisingly easy. You know, we'd never written a book before, and we certainly never written a book together, but this book just wanted to be written, it felt like. And we wrote it fast, and we wrote it more or less together, and we had a whole system for how we did that we established early on. So that part was surprisingly easy. And there were a lot of other learnings that came after we wrote the book around publicity and marketing and things that we weren't as clear on. That was a lot more challenging. And we're now, I think, starting to get used to that world. But as writers, I think we were pretty comfortable. What would you say that we left out, or the things we didn't include?
Yeah, I mean, I just think, so given the times that we're in, it's June 5th today. So a little more than a week since George Floyd was murdered. And to me, it feels like this is really all that we need to be talking about. That the inequities that are surfacing right now, that we're seeing so blatantly, so clearly on these videotapes, this is what we need to be talking about in terms of ethics and precepts. You know, as Dharma practitioners, how do our precepts really come into play right now in this world? And to me, this means, like, we have a little sidebar in one of our chapters about how mindfulness can dismantle white supremacy. And I tell my little story about kind of waking up to some of these patterns. In one of the drafts, we had a whole other section that was arguing for reparations. That in terms of practicing non-harm, what that means for white people now is taking responsibility for all the historical trauma and historical inequity, and then giving back, really in material ways right now. And that particular section, I think, it didn't make it in the book because I think maybe it felt like it was so full on, like, I don't remember exactly why we cut it. It just wasn't well written either. I wrote it and it was like, oh, just bringing up a whole lot of other issues. But now I feel like maybe we should have had the courage to really just go for that, you know? At this time, I feel like there's no mincing words. There's no turning away. That mindfulness, meditation, living an ethical life means keeping ourselves really engaged, really clear, really committed to undoing these systems of harm. So if we were to write it now, again, I think I would put more of that in there and really sort of focus it around how we bring these precepts to practice in a world that really isn't demonstrating them in so many ways. Yeah.
Great. I feel like I actually printed out, I had Reba, she had a copy of the book. I said, type the part at the end of that section. And I wanted to talk about that because I feel like that's not something that Dharma books usually talk about, because we're studying ancient texts and it's like, okay, how does it relate back to today? Sometimes people are like, oh, let's not touch that with a 10-foot pole. Or, you know, it feels like that as a student, because teachers may talk about it in a retreat setting, but I don't feel like a lot of people are doing the work to talk about it and really bring it to like the white audience, honestly. You know, like I know a lot of different Dharma teachers and I've studied with a lot of teachers, and I feel like that is something that's definitely lacking. So I just want to applaud you on that, especially now. I mean, I don't know if you can have a reprint or something like that, you know, like when you sell out of all the ones that are out right now and you have to reprint it, you can add to that. The other thing that I wanted to mention, and I mean, this is all things that people are experiencing right now, is for me, when people talked about going into quarantine, it's going on retreat. So I think people that have mindfulness backgrounds or have done any kind of work in that way, I almost feel like a collectiveness of people that went, we know what to do. We've done this. We've got this. Let us tell you, you know, like I feel like there's been a kind of rising up of people to help others who are not familiar with seclusion. And you guys talk about seclusion. I wondered if either of you could touch on that.
Yeah, sure. I think that there is this skill set that you can develop. And you can develop it by going on retreat, you know, by going on weekend retreats, by going on week-long retreats, and even going on longer retreats. And you can also develop it just by sitting daily, you know, for 20 minutes a day or 30 minutes a day. And in the book, we call it seclusion, in the sense that it's a time when we're turning off all of our devices or putting them on airplane mode, where we're taking a break from the constant onslaught of information and and flashing lights and shiny things that kind of own our consciousness a lot of our days. And instead of being focused outward on all of these you know, kind of information technologies, we come inward. And we begin to notice this living body, this experience, which is always unique, always fresh, always changing, always engaged in one way or another. And when we get used to that sense of taking the backward step, as they say in Zen sometimes, then being secluded or semi-quarantined becomes much more workable. You know, it's still difficult to be somewhat trapped in a house with your family or your loved ones. It's still very difficult to deal with the amount of fear that has arisen for people. You know, you're still going to have challenges. And I think that's one thing that we like to emphasize a lot. It's not that mindfulness is going to shut down all of your feelings and you're just going to be this perfectly shanti being who never gets flustered by life. But it's more like you can get pretty comfortable with the ways that you fluster, right? If your thing is fear, you can get really intimate with that fear and know how to work with it when it comes up. Not in a way that is blocking it, but also not in a way that is totally buying into it and getting lost. Or if your thing is anger, or if your thing is sadness, whatever it is, you can become very, very familiar with all of your states of heart, all of your states of mind, and your physical states through these practices of seclusion. And that makes something like being secluded, quarantined, quite a lot easier.
And I think, you know, I would add that in some ways it's like the opposite of seclusion, because if we're in small spaces with a lot of people all at once and we're trying to work from home and be teachers to our kids, you know, make sure they get educated, it's anything but retreat, right? Now is a very chaotic time. And again, I think I said it, it's like, how do we bring these practices to bear right in this moment in the middle of the chaos? And so offering these online retreats, I think, is certainly an opportunity for some seclusion, but also a really interesting creative challenge for how do we use these practices, use the schedule in a way that fits with my home life. You know, that might mean taking breaks from the Zooming. That might mean bringing my kids into a sitting session, you know, together, so that we're in it with our cats and our dogs in the spin of things, and that we're still committed to practice, but in ways that also really support our home lives. So sometimes I think historically Dharma meditation has been thought of as separate, something I go away to do, and then I have my whole life and my engaged political activity over here. And now more than ever, I think those days are over. Like, we need to really look at how we integrate both so that our practice supports engagement and engagement supports practice. So I think that's what we really want to talk about, is over these 3 days, how do we practice together in ways that feel nourishing and also practical and accessible and useful for these times.
Great, because that is the practice, right? We sit so that we know what to do when we are not sitting. So I really, really love that you brought that up. I have a lot of animals and a lot of kids. So for this weekend, now I've got thunder, I've got kids, I've got birds, you know, so just letting you know. So I'll be muted a lot. What can like kind of, I know you just told us about it's okay to bring our life in, but what can students kind of expect as far as like, is this a silent retreat? I have posted the schedule on the website so people are able to look at what is coming, but give us a little sense of what students can expect.
Yeah, so we really like to teach in this kind of dynamic, multimodal fashion, so that there'll be certainly periods of silence, guided sitting meditations, invitations to do walking meditation, slow, formal walking practice, also informal walking practice outside in your yard, in your neighborhood. But we also really are so committed to building community. And it's been lovely, and we're so grateful to get to be part of yours and to be invited into all these relationships that potentially are still, like, you know each other, right? That's different than just stepping into a meditation hall without any former relationships. And so we want to build on those by offering breakout groups and small group discussions and practice conversations, so that people are really relying on the refuge of Sangha at this time too. We're finding that the momentum of practice and sharing stories and sharing these creative ways that we're finding to work in these situations can be just such a resource and really a refuge at these times.
Mm-hmm. And the one thing that I'll add is, if you're somebody who really just doesn't love breakout rooms, you can always pass. So
Definitely.
still come to the retreat, even if you don't love breakout rooms.
Well, and I was going to speak to that because we have a lot of people that are included in our, mailings and that sort of thing. But of course, not everyone can come to everything. And it's a lot of, we kind of offer people a lot of different styles of Buddhist, teaching. So it's almost like, I'm not saying we have clubs, okay, but it's sort of like, some people like this style, some people like that style. So I definitely would say it's less likely that people that know each other will be there. Mm-hmm. So I just want to make that clear, so that, how do you feel about, if you've never done any kind of meditation in person, or if you're just a very big beginner, would they, I feel like, yes, they would get something out of it, but can you speak to that?
Absolutely welcome. Yeah, I think that's the other piece, is certainly drawing on relationships that are already there, but really building new conversations. We certainly, our book is written for beginners. We certainly love teaching people who are just being introduced to these practices for the first time. And it's been surprising because we both have had skepticism in the past for online Dharma offerings. And yet we found that this platform, that Zoom really has a lot, that we can build intimacy even across the distances, even if we're silent with each other. That there's a lot of sort of because of all the loneliness and isolation that's happening right now, this tool actually can really build those bridges. So it's both and for people who are really a central part of the community, but also people who are newcomers and interested to learn, for sure.
That's so great. And I feel like I want to just tell everyone to download the book, read the book. You know, I'm telling you, it's so good. To me, I wish this was my first introduction because it is so real life talk. And sometimes things can be intimidating if you're being presented with a lot of concepts and you don't really know the background, you know? So I feel like it is a great first book to come into meditation and Buddhist practice, or, you know, just adding to whatever your philosophy of life is. You don't even have to have Buddhist thoughts, you know? So just so palatable. Last book question is, how did you come up with choosing that as a title?
Oh my Lord. That was the most horrific part of the writing process. So we love our publisher, Shambhala Publications. We love everybody at Shambhala Publications. And every step of the way, we were on the same page. It was an incredibly easy writing process with our editor and working with the marketing people. And, you know, writing a book is a team sport, probably a lot more of a team sport than most people know. You know, you have a ton of support as you're going through the writing process if you have a good publisher. And everybody was just on the same page with everything in the book, even some of the far out stuff that we did in that book, like talking about racial justice and talking about sex and talking about patriarchy and talking about the things that Buddhists don't talk about. Our publisher was like, yes, let's do this. Then we got to the title. And we went through hundreds of titles.
Yeah, so first it was Uprighting the Storm. Then, what was the next one? For a while it was You Don't Need a Hammer. You Do You. All the Feels. We had so many and just kept getting rejected. So I was running early one morning and some friend of mine had just used that phrase, hot mess. And I was sort of thinking about how funny, silly it is. And this popped into my head as a total joke. Like, well, our book kind of is about how not to be a hot mess. And it wasn't serious, right? Like I wrote it to our editor, Jen, at the time, just like, hey, this is kind of a joke title, right? And she wrote back really quickly. She was like, I love this title. This
Oh my
is it.
God.
I know. And then both of us were kind of cringing. We're like, no, that can't be a title. And then they ran with it, right? Hot pink, yellow. And at a certain point, we sort of had to surrender and just be like, I guess it's going to be it. We're
Right.
going to be the
I
hot
love
mess
it.
people.
I love it too.
Yeah.
I have now embraced this title, but it was a process.
It was definitely a process.
Well, and I just want to speak to, you know, that kind of what I would consider like almost like a playful nature of the title is feeling like when I ask people to come in this current, you know, people are just heavy hearted, you know, and so to me, I said, well, I'm going to just send some people that I know that might want to do it an email. And then therein lies a whole nother issue because they're going, oh, are you thinking I'm a hot mess? Because I'm directly asking them to come to this retreat. So it's pretty funny in that way too. So I've tried to just let go of what I think they're going to think.
But aren't we all kind of a hot mess?
Right. I mean, I'm accepting of that. And I'm also accepting that they're a hot mess, but I don't want them to be offended.
Right.
We've gotten some good mileage out of it. You know, we've given them away for birthday presents. And when we sign, we're like, boy, do you really need this book?
Yeah. I love the Instagram posts of all the other Dharma teachers, like raising an eyebrow to that. So that was really cool. And let's talk about the fact that you're talking about sex. I feel like that was huge. Because we don't have to go into all the details of what you were talking about, but I know that, like, to me, it is something that nobody talks about. So it was very refreshing. And, you know, I definitely enjoyed that part of it. And I really feel like it speaks to, in any way it's ever been disseminated to me, it's just like, don't do it. You know what I mean? Like that's to me kind of what I've taken from it. And this is my perspective of what I received from the whatever teaching, but that's to me, it was kind of like, don't get caught up in that, And so I feel like your teaching is more, let's get into it, So let's connect with what that is. And so I really, really appreciate that teaching. I feel like I learned a lot from that. So thank you so much for that. Did you want to say anything about that, or?
I would just say it was a really hard chapter to write. And yet it was really gratifying to be able to name these, we talk about these structures like patriarchy and consumerism and objectification. And it just felt cathartic to actually name them and how they work in our own internal systems and then in the wider culture. So
I wouldn't have ever thought that was part of, talking about sex. I really wouldn't have thought that. But then as soon as you started breaking it down, I was like, yeah, that totally makes sense. So now I've got to have my 16-year-old listen to it. She's going to have the talk and you're giving it to her. Okay, she's already had the talk. Okay, let me be real about that. But so anyway, thank you so much for spending time with us. I know that we probably went a little bit long, but I really appreciate you spending the time. And I have one last ask, if you don't mind. I wanted to know if you wanted to do the TikTok couples challenge. So this is a game that they play on TikTok. And what happens, and I know you guys are like on TikTok all day long. So what you do is you both cover your eyes with your hands, and then I'll ask a question, and the question you have to say who in the couple is that thing. So I'll ask the question, and if it's you, you point at yourself, and if it's the other person, you point at the other person. Y'all ready?
Sounds good.
Okay. So cover your eyes. Who is more romantic?
I don't know.
You're going to have to put your hands up a little bit higher because I can't see. Okay, thank you. Who cooks better? Who snores? Who is the funny one? Who can make fun of themselves? Who has better fashion taste? Who has the craziest family?
I know who's winning.
who takes time to get ready? Who takes more time to get ready? Awesome. That's the end of the couples challenge. You'll just have to watch the video to know what happened.
That's so funny. Yeah. I don't know. I think you really won that one.
Well, it's not really about who won. It's just really about just a fun thing to play around with. But I just do want to again say thank you so much for spending the time for us to kind of get to know you. And I'm hoping that we have a lot of people together online it's June 12th through the 14th. And we just look forward to hanging out with you more, learning from you, and really digging deep into how not to be a hot mess. Thank you so much,
Beth. Yeah, we're looking forward to being with all of you.
We'll see you later. Bye.